The mountains loomed like ghostly sentinels, silent and deadly, on January 24, 1945, in the unforgiving Carpathian Mountains of Slovakia. Nature was about to unleash a horror that would claim hundreds of lives in mere hours. World War II had already carved its brutal path across Europe, leaving destruction in its wake. But this day would be different. This day the soldiers wouldn't face enemy gunfire or artillery. They would face something far more terrifying and unpredictable. An apocalyptic blizzard that would become one of the most devastating natural disasters in military history. The Slovak mountain range stretched before the German and Hungarian troops like a frozen nightmare. Temperatures had been plummeting for days, dropping to well below zero. Wind speeds were building, gathering strength like an invisible predator preparing to strike. Most of the soldiers were young teenagers and men in their early 20s who had been conscripted into a war they barely understood. Their uniforms, designed for combat, offered little protection against the mounting cold. Thin cotton shirts, standard-issue wool jackets and leather boots would become their all-shroud. By mid-morning the sky transformed. What began as a light snowfall rapidly mutated into something monstrous. Winds reached hurricane speeds, whipping snow and ice across the mountainous terrain with unimaginable fury. Visibility dropped to almost zero within minutes. Soldiers who moments ago could see their comrades now found themselves completely isolated. The blizzard wasn't just cold, it was violent. Wind speeds exceeded 100 kilometers per hour, creating massive snowdrifts that could swallow a man whole. Temperature readings plunged to negative 30 degrees Celsius temperature, so extreme it could freeze exposed skin in minutes. Military historians would later describe this as a perfect storm of environmental conditions. The unique topography of the Carpathian Mountains, with their steep valleys and narrow passes, amplified the blizzard's destructive potential. Snow would funnel through mountain corridors, creating wind tunnels that transformed snowflakes into deadly projectiles. Survival became a moment-by-moment calculation. Those caught in the open had mere minutes before hypothermia would begin shutting down their bodies. Exposed skin would first burn with cold, then rapidly lose sensation. Ears and toes would go numb, then black. Core body temperature would drop, causing disorientation and eventual unconsciousness. The soldiers' equipment became useless. Compasses couldn't function in the magnetic interference created by the storm. Radio communications became impossible. Each unit was completely cut off, forced to make survival decisions in total isolation. Some groups attempted to dig snow caves, using their helmets and bare hands to create makeshift shelters. Others huddled together, trying to share body heat. But the blizzard was relentless, filling these temporary shelters with snow faster than they could be constructed. By late afternoon, entire battalions had vanished, not defeated by enemy fire, but completely erased by the white darkness of the storm. Snow would drift and settle, creating massive tombs that would hide hundreds of bodies for decades. The human body has remarkable survival mechanisms, but they have limits. In extreme cold, blood begins to prioritize protecting vital organs. Extremities are sacrificed first. Ears, toes, nose and ears lose circulation. The brain begins to slow cognitive functions, creating a dreamlike state where survival instincts gradually fade. Military records would later reveal that over 600 soldiers died that day. Not from combat, but from the mountain's merciless environmental assault. They weren't killed by bullets or bombs, but by something far more indiscriminate and patient. Rescue efforts were almost impossible. Other units attempting to locate and save their comrades were themselves at risk of becoming victims. Helicopter and ground rescue technologies of the 1940s were primitive compared to modern standards. Each attempted rescue was itself a potential death mission. When the storm ally subsided 2 days later, the landscape had been completely transformed. Entire mountain passes were unrecognizable, buried under meters of snow. Rescue teams would spend weeks searching, knowing that each hour reduced the chances of being survivors. The blizzard of January 1945 would become a somber footnote in World War II history, a reminder that in war nature can be a more ruthless enemy than any human adversary. The landscape bore silent witness to the devastation, its white expanse hiding countless stories of human struggle and sacrifice. Forensic teams would later piece together fragments of what occurred, using advanced geological and meteorological analysis to reconstruct the environmental conditions that created such a perfect storm of destruction. Magnetic recordings from nearby weather stations showed unprecedented atmospheric disturbances. The mountain range had created a unique meteorological trap, funneling Arctic air masses with extraordinary velocity and intensity. What seemed like a random blizzard was in fact a complex interaction of geographical and climatic factors that transformed a military operation into a catastrophic environmental event. Survivors' testimonies collected years after the incident revealed haunting details of those hours. Soldiers spoke of hallucinations brought on by extreme cold, of seeing phantoms moving through the white ID, of hearing ices that seemed to emerge from the wind itself. The human mind, when pushed to its absolute limits, creates its own desperate narratives of survival. Military historians would spend decades analyzing this event, not just as a tactical failure, but as a profound lesson in human vulnerability. The incident challenged fundamental assumptions about military preparedness and the unpredictability of environmental warfare. Modern military training now includes extensive cold weather survival protocols developed directly from the lessons learned on those frozen mountainsides. Forensic pathologists who later examined recovered bodies discovered remarkable details about human physiological responses to extreme cold. The progression of hypothermia was meticulously documented, showing how the human body fights its battle against environmental collapse. Cellular damage, the crystallization of blood, the gradual shutdown of metabolic processes, each stage told a story of remarkable resilience and ultimate fragility. Geological evidence suggested that the mountain range itself played a crucial role in amplifying the storm's intensity. Unique rock formations and elevation changes created wind corridors that concentrated and accelerated the blizzard's fury. What might have been a typical winter storm became a concentrated weapon of environmental destruction. Personal effects found among the soldiers told fragmented stories of individual lives suddenly interrupted. Photographs of family members, letters never sent, small personal talismans, each artifact represented a universe of human experience suddenly frozen in time. Military archivists would carefully catalogue these remnants, understanding they were more than mere objects, they were memories preserved in ice. Communication logs from surrounding military units revealed the growing sense of helplessness as contact was lost. Radio operators described increasingly desperate transmissions, ice is becoming fainter, messages more fragmented as units were progressively swallowed by the storm. The recordings became a haunting audio document of human beings confronting an implacable natural force. Archaeological teams would later use ground-penetrating radar to map the vast burial grounds created by the blizzard. Entire formations lay entombed, preserved in a moment of absolute struggle. Modern technology allowed researchers to reconstruct not just the physical positions of the fallen, but to understand the moments of their collective experience. Meteorological studies, conducted decades later, confirmed that the storm represented a statistical anomaly, a confluence of atmospheric conditions so rare that it might occur only once in several centuries. The mountain range had become a natural killing field, its topography and climate conspiring to create a perfect environmental trap. Psychological studies of surviving veterans revealed long-term trauma that extended far beyond the physical experience. Many spoke of recurring dreams dominated by whiteness, of hearing wind that seemed to carry ghostly whispers, of a profound sense of isolation that had never truly left them. The blizzard had wounded not just bodies but souls. The incident would eventually reshape military thinking about environmental warfare, leading to advanced research into cold weather survival technologies. Specialized equipment, communication systems designed to function in extreme conditions, and comprehensive training protocols all emerged from the painful lessons learned on those frozen mountainsides. Satellite imagery from subsequent decades would reveal subtle geological scars left by the event as slight terrain depressions where massive formations had been crushed, wind-sculpted ice formations marking the boundaries of human endurance. Climate scientists would later determine that this single event represented a critical inflection point in understanding extreme meteorological phenomena. The blizzard's characteristics defied traditional modeling, suggesting complex interactions between atmospheric systems that remained not fully comprehended. Generational trauma rippled through families of the fallen. Children and grandchildren of those lost would inherit stories told in hushed whispers, fragments of memory that never quite resolved into complete understanding. Some would spend decades researching, trying to reconstruct the precise sequence of events that claimed their ancestors. International military archives gradually released classified documents, revealing increasingly complex narratives about the strategic considerations that placed troops in such vulnerable positions. Political machinations, bureaucratic decisions, and geopolitical tensions emerged as underlying threads connecting human suffering to larger systemic failures. Forensic reconstruction techniques allowed researchers to create digital simulations of the hours. Three-dimensional models mapped the progressive collapse of human organizational structures under environmental stress, showing how discipline and training gradually gave way to pure survival instinct. Survivors who lived to tell their stories spoke not of heroism but of profound vulnerability. They described a landscape that transformed from terrain into a living malevolent entity, wind and ice becoming sentient forces that systematically dismantled human resistance. Anthropological studies examined how different cultural groups conceptualized and survived extreme environmental challenges. Indigenous communities who had generations of adaptation to harsh landscapes offered nuanced perspectives that challenged traditional military survival strategies. The physical landscape itself became a memorial. Glacial cores extracted decades later would contain microscopic evidence, trace organic materials, compressed atmospheric particle, serving as a permanent record of that moment of collective human struggle. Emerging environmental research suggested that such extreme events might become more frequent with global climate shifts. The blizzard was no longer seen as a singular historical anomaly, but potentially a harbinger of future environmental challenges. Psychological research tracked the long-term impact on survivors and their descendants. Transgenerational trauma studies revealed how profound environmental experiences could reshape genetic expression, creating lasting physiological and emotional imprints that extended far beyond individual lifetimes. In quiet mountain villages near the event's epicenter, local folklore gradually absorbed the narrative. Stories passed through generations transformed the blizzard from a historical incident into a mythic representation of human confrontation with elemental forces. Museums would carefully preserve recovered artifacts, tattered uniforms, fragmentary equipment, personal effects, each item a testament to human fragility and resilience. Curators understood these were not mere historical objects but complex emotional landscapes captured in material form. Scientific understanding gradually evolved from documenting the event to comprehending its deeper systemic implications. What initially appeared as a localized meteorological incident revealed intricate connections between environmental dynamics, human organizational structures, and collective survival mechanisms. The mountain range itself remained a silent witness. Wind-carved surfaces, subtle geological modifications, embedded archaeological traces all bore mute testimony to that moment when human endeavor confronted absolute environmental power. In the story was neither about victory nor defeat, but about the profound complexity of human experience when confronted with forces beyond individual or collective control. The blizzard represented a moment of ultimate revelation, a stark reminder of our fundamental vulnerability and unexpected resilience. Decades later, academic conferences would still debate the philosophical and scientific implications of that singular event. Interdisciplinary scholars mapped complex networks of human response, demonstrating how seemingly isolated incidents could reveal profound systemic vulnerabilities. The blizzard became a case study in adaptive resilience, a moment where human consciousness intersected with raw environmental dynamics. Graduate students in climate psychology would analyze archival recordings, searching for subtle patterns of collective human behavior under extreme stress. Their research transcended traditional disciplinary boundaries, revealing intricate connections between ecological systems and human consciousness. Geological surveys continued monitoring the mountain range, tracking microscopic shifts in terrain and atmospheric conditions. Each core sample, each geological measurement represented a fragment of an ongoing narrative of environmental transformation, memory became its own form of preservation. Survivors' descendants carried narratives that were part historical record, part emotional inheritance. Their stories existed in a liminal space between documented fact and deeply personal mythology. The mountain range remained transformed, not just physically, but as a symbolic landscape representing human vulnerability and unexpected strength. Wind patterns, rock formations, subtle ecological shifts all bore silent witness to that moment of profound confrontation. The blizzard represented more than a meteorological event. It was a profound meditation on human existence, our intricate relationship with forces far beyond individual comprehension, our capacity to endure, to adapt, to survive even when overwhelmed by circumstances that seem insurmountable. The story continued, written in geological time, in genetic memory, in the quiet resilience of human communities that persist despite environmental challenges. Survival was not about conquering nature, but about understanding our place within its complex, unpredictable systems.